I remember when my younger brother John was born, they'd usually take the kids to Grandpa and Grandma's house or somewhere like that. And of course, it was just across the creek and over. And the one thing and the only thing that I remember about his birth, I'm 3 years and 3 months older than him, but I remember hearing my mother screaming with birth pains, I suppose, when John was being born. And that's why I remember what I remember about John's birth. Of course, I was next to the youngest, but during those years, the Depression was country and times were hard. People didn't know what money was, but we always had something to eat, and something good to eat because we lived on the farm. My dad had an orchard. He had peach trees, apple trees, plum trees, pear trees. We had grapevines. My mother had a large garden and knew how to raise all that kind of stuff. We had what they call truck patches. A big patch of Irish potatoes, a patch of sweet potatoes. We raised sorghum cane to make sorghum molasses and that sort of thing. Of course, we always raised corn. We had roasting ears. We butchered our own meat. In the country then was what was called open range. You could have as many stock as you wanted and just turn them loose. You fenced stock out instead of in like later years. And my dad never killed much beef. He'd ship the cattle, but we butchered a lot of hogs and pork. And I remember those days how we'd gather up the water and heat it a big kettle on the outside and then put it in a big barrel. And he'd use a flat bed that we used to haul hay on. We'd butcher 2 or 3 at a time. And slide them down into that hot water and scald them and take them out, and rake all the hair and clean them and everything and cut them up and put them in the smokehouse. Of course, my dad knew exactly how much salt to use and everything to preserve the meat and all of that. But when it came time to go into school, of course, we didn't know anything about kindergarten back then. You started school when you're 6 years old, first grade. Occasionally, it depended on when your birthday fell, you could they let you start. I started a little early because my birthday was in December, but they let me start before I had my 6th birthday. In the fall, school usually started around September sometime back then. And times were hard in many ways in that. Summertime, we didn't know what a pair of shoes was. And we went to school barefooted in that, but in the wintertime, you needed some shoes. And there was a man in the store whose farm joined our farm on one side, and he was a doctor, a country doctor, but a medical doctor. His name was Sherman Barr, and he had a grocery store, and he would go to St. Louis. He had trucks. A lot of people owed him money in that. He had rocks piled up, made beautiful piles of rocks shaped kind of to a point on his front yard and everything, and a lot of people would work for him, and of course they'd have the grocery bill at the store, and then they just put it on their tab and then pay up whatever they agreed to, maybe at the end of the week or month, whatever, and everything, and that sort of thing. I had no idea when I was a kid. Of course, later I learned when I went to St. Louis and that he was going to like International Shoe Company, a Brown Shoe Company in St. Louis, and they were called Mistmates. And he had a big wooden bin that I think my dad built it for him in the middle of the store, country store building, and they just dumped them shoes in that store. And there was women's shoes, boys, kids' shoes, men's shoes. And in the fall, you would go and just pick you out a pair of them shoes. You paid a dime for them. Of course, men worked for $1 a day, so that was more like several dollars today, the value of it. And sometimes you could find shoes that would match, and sometimes you didn't. It wasn't unusual for kids. Nobody would have thought anything about it because we was all in the same boat, to speak, in those times. And sometimes you didn't find a match that was the same size, but you made do with what you did. And my dad, the only feed he bought, they called it shorts, some kind of ground up wheat and stuff for the fine, and they came in sacks and that. And the mothers made a lot of our clothes. They had the manual, I would say, sewing machine with your foot. My mother was a good sewer. Sanger was one of the leading brands in that day and time. Some of those are still around. They bring a lot of money because they're what he called it, antiques now, you know. Margaret's got my sister's sewing machine, and might have been my mother's, and things of that nature. But people made do with what they had. We walked about 2 miles to school, and it was the same creek, but it bent back and forth. We crossed that creek 3 times, and some of the parents would cut, they called it a foot log, they'd cut a tree across. And kids, being kids, push one another off into the creek. And even in the wintertime, we get to school and they had a great big wood heater. You know, it was a 1-room building. You had 1 through 8th grade in the same room. But teacher would put us up by and dry us out, you know. Somebody almost in the wintertime, that even would be ice and snow. But in the wintertime, wanting to go to, I remember my poor mother, she'd fix her lunch and everything, and then she'd wrap our feet and legs up with toe sacks or anything like that. And it seemed like the snow was awfully deep. I guess it's because we're small. And so we'd go to school like that in the snow and everything. We never thought about the snow or anything keeping us from going, you know. And in school in those days, dodgeball and softball was the 2 main. And when I was in school, basketball started coming along and everything. But some of the schools couldn't even afford to put up the basketball hooks and everything, you know, because teachers got paid local pay, and they just got my uncle was the man who gave them, I forget what they call it, but it's a piece of paper, and they could go to the bank, collect, and they had the money, and it was almost nothing. But anyway, in the upper grades, I pitched softball, and we had softball, and a teacher came, his name was Baker, wonderful man. He had 3 boys, and his wife was a teacher. She had the Czar School just above us. She was set up in districts, and the Lookout School was the district we were in. We were right on the line. He taught there, and he got softball going. We had a team, and he bought a brand new 1940 Chevrolet. This was on up toward the end of my school, grade school, and he would take us somewhere. We'd go to different schools on Friday evening, and that was really something for us in that day and time. I was a pitcher in that, and I think we would call our school named Lookout, and they named our ball team Lookout Tough Nuts. we were number 1 in the whole school district. Steelville, of course, was 25 miles away, but that's where the superintendent of the school district's now worked out of that school district. But the local school board hired a teacher and everything. Sometimes they get a woman, sometimes a man. Sometimes they had a tough time getting the teacher. Now the doctor, his youngest son was Herman Barr. You remember Herman lived across the street from us in Deloes, wonderful man. He was my first grade teacher, and he walked down by the house and walked to school, and I remember Herman leading me. Of course, he always thought a lot of me and everything, and he died not too many years back. He came to give me $10,000 for the Czar Cemetery to put in the fund. It can't be touched for nothing, you know. And then he came down with Alzheimer's a while before he finally died and everything. Buried right to the side of the church. It's already Dr. Bard is, and my parents and everything's buried there. But it seems like people were very happy in those days. Now they had a fair every year, and they still have country fairs, and the school went and they had different things they did. our school didn't have any real fast runners. I wasn't a fast runner, but I was one of the best we had, they said. We ran barefooted then, you know. Tennis shoes were just beginning to come out. Most people couldn't afford them and that. And they had a blue ribbon, a white ribbon, and a red. I believe blue was the top. And for 2 or 3 years in school and at the fair and that, we did a lot of practice and then played against schools, you know, till the end of the year. And I got the blue ribbon for, I think, 3 years in a row. And I've used it as an illustration in teaching and preaching that. I wasn't that good of a runner, but they just didn't have any good runners. I guess I did pretty good. I got the blue ribbon, and that was really something to be proud of, you know. Days like that, and that for the kids, you know, on the farm and everything. Also during my school year, I had my first ice cream cone. I think I was in the 3rd grade. I got promoted twice, 2 different times in grade school, because I had a cousin. He was 2 years younger than me, Elmer Turnbough, Uncle Edmund's boy. They're all dead now, but have been for some time. He and I was really good. We got nicknamed as a teacher's pet because the others, I guess, was jealous. But we worked hard. I remember the teacher come home, stayed with us a night or two during the year, and tell her parent how hard we were working and that, you know. That's where our parent raised us, you know. But even back then, some just didn't apply themselves, you know, and that sort of thing. But Herman Barr never did forget that. He'd always ask me about my brothers and sisters. He went on and he had what you call a high-level degree then. You could teach. You went to high school and then you went a few more hours and got a little more, but you was working on your degree. He decided he wanted to be a lawman, and he became a state trooper. And when he got through his training at Jeff City, the state capitol, where they had the school, state trooper, and still do, when he got sworn in and everything, and he gave him a patrol car, the first time I ever remember seeing a state trooper patrol car. The road was rough there, and we heard a noise. Herman had come home to his dad. His mother had died. Dad was married to another lady and then stepmother. And the next place he went, he came down that rough creek, across the creek, and pulled up in front of our house. He wanted Mom and Dad to see his patrol. He was so proud. Of course, he went on and made sergeant, went over to the district, you know, and retired from it and everything. He was known as a man who even gave his wife a ticket one time. She was teaching school, speaking, that he treated everybody the same all the way through, and regardless. And I'll tell this and then I'll go back to something else. While I was pastoring Parkview Church in Deloge, 1962, Herman, back then you was either a Chevrolet or Ford man, and then Plymouth come along by Chrysler. Herman bought a brand new Chevrolet in 1962. He bought a new car every 2 or 3 years. I bought a new American Rambler. I bought a new 1960 when I left Peoria. I had to turn the big car in. I was required to either drive a Cadillac or a New York Chrysler. I talked them and let me have a Rocket automobile. But anyway, I turned that one in and got a 60 when I went down to Lowe's out in St. Louis. I traded in Farmington for a 62 Rose Rambler with a white top. The other one was a green. And when I pulled up, it always made Herman feel so good when somebody he knew going up. He's just that type of a person, you know. He came right over and complimented me and wanted to see it. And so I let him drive it. I drove his. He'd had his new Chevy about 2 weeks. He drove it around the Lowe's there and around, if you remember, that's why the church was called Parkview Church, that nice park there. And he said it was about noontime, and he said, Elmer, I got to go in and get dressed, and I got to go to work. And so I said, well, I got to go to Bonzira Miners Hospital and make some calls. So he went and eat dressed. I saw him back out, and I'd eaten that, and Mom fixed us some lunch and that. And I got in the car and I started to leave the Lowe's. I went down toward, we go to get on Highway 67, but there was a shortcut, a county road across there, and a one-way bridge. And the hospital was just as you was coming into Volunteer. It's still there. It's a big nursing. They made a big nursing home out of it. But anyway, at that one-way bridge, you're just getting out of the Lowe's, I saw Herman and another trooper, and they were checking driver's license and car lights. And I pulled up and I heard Herman say to her, I think he had two troopers working with him, one on each side of the one-way bridge. I heard him say, "I'll take this car." He stepped up to the window. I had rolled my window down. He said, crank rollers in. He stepped up the side of the car. "How are you today, Reverend Turnbough?" I said, "I'm fine. How are you, Sergeant Barr?" He said, turn your signals on." They walked around and see if they were all working then. He said, "May I see your driver's license?" I took him out. He didn't say, "We just been together." But he went by the book. He looked at my driver's license, handed it back to me and that. Said, "Everything looks fine. Have a great day. Have a Turnbough." And I've just told that. And I've told that, and people, 2 or 3 people almost beat Herman to death over there because he was such a strict pro, but he treated everybody the same. That's one thing. And when he died, people still say today that that was Herman Barr. But that's just some of your, experiences that you can go through with people. But I want to go back. By the way, my first ice cream cone, I think I was in the 1st grade. I'd been 8 or 9 years old. Typhoid fever, I think it was, really hitting schools and kids. And nobody knew what a vaccination or anything like that was, as far as I know. And the school was going to vaccinate everybody, but you had to take them into Steelville, into the town. And of course, we were 20-some miles from there. So Roy Britton, who run the country store over the other way out by our school, had an international truck with a stock rack on it. They'd go, haul their groceries to the store, and everything came in book then. But anyway, 2 or 3 guys that had a truck bid to take the school into our school to get the vaccination. And so they wanted the mothers or somebody to go with the kids. So Mom and Dolly and I and John must have probably been in the 1st grade then. I don't know if Dorothy, I think she quit school in 6th or 7th grade. But I believe it was Dolly and me and John went. And they said if we'd all be good and everything, and there's an ice cream store on Main Street in Steelville, right across up just a few feet from where I eat now. And ice cream cones was $0.05 a piece, and that was a lot of money for the mothers that had kids. But anyhow, I think my mom took some eggs to the store and got 6 cents a dozen for them and sold some old hens of that. And we got, I remember, an ice cream cone for $0.05, an ice cream cone that first time. And that's what it was like in those days. And that was probably the first time, might have been the first time I'd ever been in the town. They'd call it the hard road, and then the hard road was a slab or concrete, but it just went just a few hundred yards out of the city limits, and it was just on the dirt and gravel roads in those days, But we didn't know anything different, so that was something big. We stood up in the back of that stock rack, and it was just like cardwood standing straight up, It was, I think, a 1-ton truck, and of course had a high stock rate. I remember his kids was hollering, making a lot of noise. And Roy was a little bitty man, and he's a grandfather to Brother Beers that had Margaret and John's funeral, and they got pastor there, Steelville. And then you usually had it was my cousin on my mother's side, a man living to get married, and he was big stout guy, and he usually drove Roy, particularly when he went to St. Louis to get groceries or something, because Roy never did learn to drive in St. Louis. But he had that Perry to pull over. Perry Chandler was the guy's name. He come back here and really, he was a member of the Pentecostal church, or I think a deacon, but he used some words that I remember as a kid, quieting down. But you know, I guess there's 30 or 40 of us. And the mothers, they just pushed us in there. We stood up and rode down, I think it's 22, 23 miles. But, you know, but on that gravel road, if they made it an hour, hour and a half, they thought they'd brag at each other, guys that had old vehicle to argue whose vehicle would get them there the quickest, you know. But that's just, you know, some of the things of childhood and things going. But you mentioned it a while ago and that, but everybody had chores to do. And when we came home from school, you had clothes to wear to school. And I know my mother, I'm glad I'll never see her knuckles bleeding again with the scrub board. She wanted us to be clean, look good. And you didn't have many changes of clothes back then. Usually most boys wore bibbed overalls then. And I was getting way up there before blue jeans started coming out. And you come home from school, you took your school clothes off, put on your work clothes, they called them. And a lot of your old work clothes, they may have several patches on them, you know, on that, but you put on your work clothes. And each child had assigned something to do. One of my jobs was to split cookwood. We cooked with a wood stove. If it was on into the winter, you had wood boxes behind the stove where you come in and stack the wood in there real neatly. And that, my mother really wanted things clean and neat. If you dropped a chip, you picked it up, you know. But get dressed, and in the summertime with the axe, even as a kid, you learn how to do something before you're young. And get in kindlings to start. We always had a gallon can of car oil to, you know, start us far with and then. But we carried in the wood and all of that. In the fall of the year, you had your crops to get in. I remember changing my work clothes. My dad always put out at least 1 acre, sometimes 2, of cane, and it grew just like corn. But we stripped they call it fodder, you know, the leaves would go way out like corn. We tied them in bundles to feed stock later, and then the cane was just long like a stick, you know, the main part. And that's what you cut and took to the sorghum mill and run it through to get the juice out. And they had vats, they called them, over fires where they cooked that juice into syrup, sorghum molasses, you know, and everything. But during the fall of the year, we picked up like that. We might cut corn, we tied it up in shocks, and then there come the time when you broke the shocks down after it had dried and everything. You broke the ears of corn off, you put them in a pile, you tied they call it fodder, the stalks and everything up to feed the cattle and horses in the wintertime into bundles. And but you worked till dark. And then Mom would always have a good country meal. Cooked on a wood stove, you know. It might be cornbread and beans, fried potatoes, or roasting ears, and my dad knew how to cut up pork meat and everything. It might be pork chops. Back then, kid, you know, if you didn't think it was good, you look back now, you know how good we did eat because we raised our stuff, you know. Mom and Dad grew up on the farm, knew how to take care and cure meat and all this stuff and make things what was the best, you know, as far as that goes. My dad would take corn, we shell enough corn, put it in a sack. Sometimes he'd ride a horse, and we had somebody up at Dillard, Missouri, which was 6 miles away, and he was taking quite a bit. Sometimes the people, he might take the wagon team, put it in the wagon bed, we could take several sacks. And we raised some wheat too, and you went to the grist mill, they called it, and down there where we went, that's what that was at Alice Springs, But they used to grind corn in that. We went upstairs, and so you take corn to the, after I got older than that, sometimes they could trust you to ride the horse for yourself, Dad sent a boy, with grind meal for a cornbread and wheat for a flour, that sort of thing, And there were just so many things to do. There's always something on a farm, a fence to repair. A lot of the fence then was wooden rail fence, they call it, rail this way. And my dad didn't have much barbed wire. He had some and the wire fence, but most of it was rail fence. Or even the wire fence, we made wooden posts. We cut them out of our own wood, split them, and they were like 6 feet long. And then you took an axe and sharpened, and you had a post hammer, it weighed, I think, 12 pounds. You swing that all day, have posts, you ready for some cornbread and beans at night. But it was things like that, And then as kids, bigger farmers, men would get $1 a day, and if they had a teenage boy, and I never had any trouble, I'd work with Dad to give his kid when he was 13, 14, 15 years old, 50 cents a day to work, And you're very happy to get that. And my dad contracted, he'd cut rinks of wood. He'd try to get to school. Around each school would order 10 rinks. They call it card, but a card has to be 3 feet long, 4 feet high and 8 feet long, but people with stoves, some would want 14 inches long or whatever, And if they had a fireplace, well, they probably wanted about 2 feet long, But my dad, he got to work. He was bidding for 99 cents a card, a rink, because he knew other guys, neighbors, that was going to probably bid $1, and he got the 10 rinks. That was pretty good, And we cut it with a cross-cut saw, split it with axe, and hammer and wedge it, and then load it in a wagon and haul it and stack it up at the schools and people. But there's just so many different ways. We cut timber down with a cross-cut saw and settled to the country sawmills that sawed lumber and ties that they sold. There was a Turnbough wagon factory in Burnham years ago, a long time. The railroad come in there back a long time, even before I was born. And it all played out, and then later when the mines come there, But we always went to church. My mother was a dedicated Christian. She'd become a Christian and was baptized in the Hood River. Now, her folks had a big farm for that, cut up there below Dillard in the Hood River, Tinker place. And my grandpa Tinker died in 1919. He was a big farmer for those days and had several teams and people working for him. Grandma would have a big meal fixed. They'd always furnish dinner for people on the farm. Then they said they took the teams out from the plow, the story I always got, and a lot of times men would jump up on a horse, even though they had their harness on, and Grandpa jumped up on one of the horses of his team. They'd take the team in, water them, and feed them corn and everything at noontime. And between this, he had 3 or 4 teams working for the hard people, on the other teams. And before they got to the house, Grandpa fell off of his horse and probably had a heart attack in those days. They never knew. So anyhow, that's how he died pretty young. He had, I think, Mom had 7 or 8 brothers and sisters, and so I never did see my Grandpa Tinker then, But I guess he was quite a farmer and industrial type for that day and time, That's how he went. But usually then, they'd get him ready and bury him the next day.